Today, we're looking at a brown ink by Zenzoi Brown. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. As always, there's timestamps down below in the description, so if you're in a hurry, you can skip around. But if you got the time, I would appreciate you checking out the entire video. You can also follow me over on Instagram, and if you're new here and like fountain pen ink reviews, I would invite you to subscribe. In order to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this cross Bailey with a medium nib. I used it to write for a day, and then I used it to take the notes for this video. In order to have a standardization in my writing samples, I always use Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper, although I do use more papers, and those will show up later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in cartridge form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. Now the extra fine is just a tad lighter than the stub. With no feather spread, halo sheen, it does offer some spots of shading. 14 seconds to dry. Medium is darker than the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 20 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both show no color variation, although in the extra fine we had a little. Tomoe River. No bleeding, normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is about the same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 22 seconds to dry. Medium is much darker than the extra fine or stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 37 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both shows no color variation, and we're not getting any. Rhodia. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is a little lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. It has spots of shading that do occur. 16 seconds to dry. Medium is by far the darkest tone with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 25 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine shows us some color variation. We got some. The medium shows none. And we got none. I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And what we get is this kind of purple at the bottom, and it's pushing its way up to where we get a very dark, deep magenta tone, which is where we largely are getting the brown, is that mixing of magenta and purple. Then we get this bright yellow at the top, so I would expect a lot more shading than I get. Now the one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. That purple has really gathered at the bottom, bonded with the filter paper right there. There is a little bit of water separation where the magenta red pushes higher and you see the white of the filter. There's a water separation there. Then we get that red magenta. You see bits of it is red and bits of it is magenta, so I think it's just some of it being watered down. And then a very clear separation of that yellow across the top again. Again, making me feel there should be a whole lot more shading than there is. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, I feel perfectly good using this in a note-taking situation. There's no adverse effect to going back and highlighting it. It's fantastic. Now, water's lifting all of the red, magentas, yellows off, leaving all of that kind of purple that was in the second chromatography on the line on the bottom. Now, water did not get all of this out of my pen. Pen flush, you start to see the very beginnings of the white of the paper coming through. Now, to be clear with this ink was a bit of a problem for my pen. It did get rid of most of it, but I had to run the 1/3 bleach solution into the converter just to get that last bit of the ink out. Now, it went in, came out. The 1/3 bleach solution was in there for only a couple seconds. It broke it down that fast. The 1/3 bleach solution completely removes it from the page and completely removed it from my pen. As far as viscosity or flow, for the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Zenzoi Brown has a viscosity of 1.73, making it a wet ink. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average those. Now for the inks I've tested, I have found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Zenzoi Brown has an average dry time of 22 seconds, making it a little bit slower drying than normal. Instead of finding inks that look like Zenzoi Brown, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. So I went with a nice green, named green, Noodler's Green. The second writing sample is done on Levenger, TWSBI, and black and red notebooks. Here we're looking at Levenger paper. Now we get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is about the same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen. There is some spots that are darker, and there's even a couple spots that are just a little bit lighter, so there is some shade showing it's possible, just not a lot's coming through, and the writing really stand out. 14 seconds to dry. Medium, much darker than everything on the page, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. 19 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine shows the slightest bit of color variation, and we did get some in the extra fine. The medium shows none, and we got none. TWSBI, with no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shade. The extra fine is about the same tone, maybe just a tad lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. 13 seconds to dry. Medium is much darker than everything on the paper, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. 22 seconds to dry. The scrubby of the extra fine does show a little color variation left to right, but the writing didn't. The medium shows none, and the writing showed none. And black and red, with no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, a smudge from me, and no shade. The extra fine is about the same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. 14 seconds to dry. Medium is much darker than the extra fine or stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. 22 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby of the extra fine shows a little color variation, even though we didn't get any, and the medium shows none where there was none, and that's all that I have for writing samples. So what do I think of Zenzoi Brown? It does give some tone variation depending on your pen, and it can offer a bunch of shading. But I find the tone of brown that it puts down to be kind of dull and lifeless, and I really like brown inks. It's just not a good brown for me. So what nib and pen are going to give the best writing experience with this ink? I found a dry to medium flow fine nib, put down the most pleasant tone, and still let it keep some of the shading. If you use a very wet pen, you're going to dry it out or drown out the shading, and the tone that goes down is kind of yucky. If you've enjoyed this video, remember, I like thumbs up, you like thumbs up, everybody likes thumbs up. Unless you didn't like it, then give me the thumbs down. Both are good. Thanks for watching.